What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to go over my top 24 running back rankings plus tiers. We are in the heart of draft season, and I want to help you get primed and ready to go for your fantasy football drafts. Let's start off with the first tier. It's going to be Bijan Robinson at 1 and Jahmyr Gibbs at number 2. I call this the young elite pass catchers tier. When you look at these two players, both guys playing domes, very good offensive lines. They're athletic freaks who get it done on the ground and through the air. And I'm expecting big things for both of these guys in 2025, as most analysts are. Let's take a look at Bijan Robinson here for a second. He is playing behind a top 10 offensive line per FTN's 2025 offensive line rankings. Also, 4 of their 5 projected starters all had above a 68 Pro Football Focus run block grade, which is pretty dang good. Atlanta ranked 10th in run percentage in 2024, so there will be a ton of opportunities for Bijan on the ground, but this is also a guy who gets it done through the air. Since 2015, only 5 running backs have had seasons where they featured 60 receptions or more and also averaged 85 yards per game on the ground. Bijan did this in 2024, an extremely awesome season for him. And then let's move over to the next guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Who number 2 in points per game last season with 21. That was elite production from Jahmyr Gibbs, and we saw him really explode when David Montgomery was gone. But he was also a really steady and efficient back for fantasy. Even with David Montgomery there. Jahmyr Gibbs was ranked 4th in red zone touches, even with Montgomery on the team. When you think about this Detroit Lions offense, you think of David Montgomery punching it in at the goal line a ton, but it is kind of surprising. Jahmyr Gibbs, like I said, 4th in red zone touches, even with Montgomery there. It's something that I expect to continue. Ben Johnson is gone, but they did promote from within, and I expect this offense to look pretty similar. They did lose some key players on that offensive line and some shuffling of the deck a little bit, but I think Gibbs is going to be phenomenal this year. He was number 1 in breakaway runs last season, so he's a big play waiting to happen. And this is a guy that doesn't really need a ton of volume for him to pay off on a weekly basis for you in fantasy, because he can take 1 or 2 catches to the house and make up maybe a lackluster week in volume, but he'll make it up with his efficiency and his production on that side of the ball. And he was number 7 in targets. This guy catches a ton of passes. He's featured in the pass game a ton when he is running routes, and I love him this season. Monty's also getting up there in age. He dealt with some injuries last year. He's dealt with injuries in the past during his career, and I think David Montgomery is going to be a fine running back. We'll get to him at some point in this video, but I think it's wheels up for Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to be featured a ton in this offense, and that's why he's my ranked number 2 running back on the board. I just like the idea of fresh legs with elite receiving upside in a really good offense, and Jahmyr Gibbs has all of that. Let's move over to tier 2. And tier 2 is going to have Christian McCaffrey at number 3, Saquon Barkley here at number 4, Derrick Henry at number 5, and Devon Achane at number 6. This is the tier that is age/injury, but RB1 upside. Getting any of these players at the turn, which is very possible, could feed families if they're all healthy. Saquon Barkley, you're not getting him at the turn. Christian McCaffrey is very possible to get with the last couple picks in the first round. And then Derrick Henry and Devon Achane are both players that tend to go, early second round. And when we look at these players real quick, Christian McCaffrey has an elite schedule. 49ers have a really favorable schedule this entire season, and their playoff schedule is phenomenal. I don't make playoff schedule or schedules in general as like a huge factor when I'm doing my rankings, but when players are so close in a tier, that is something that I do monitor and I do consider. And when we look at the playoff schedule for Christian McCaffrey and this offense, they get the Titans, the Colts, and the Bears for the fantasy football playoffs. That is a very juicy schedule. I don't expect those defenses to be top 10, top 15. Some of them could be better and bounce back from last season. But overall, that's a really, really awesome schedule for Christian McCaffrey and that 49ers team. Then when we look at Saquon Barkley here at number 4, Saquon Barkley touch and workload is something to note, but he's still elite, guys. And I know people have some concerns. Landon Dickerson went down in camp the other day, and there were some concerns that he might be out for the season. Is it a torn ACL? It looks like it was a small meniscus tear, and the hope is that he'll be ready and back in a couple of weeks. He might not even miss any time, but I expect that offensive line to still be really good. They have a ton of depth back there. But obviously, Landon Dickerson would be a huge blow if they lost him, but thankfully not as bad as it was expected initially. We look at Derrick Henry. I expect Derrick Henry to put on a huge season yet again. He showed no signs of slowing down last year. I think 15 touchdowns is probably the floor for Derrick Henry, maybe 14. And I mean, I think this is a guy that we could see second year in this Baltimore offense, him score, 20 plus touchdowns. I don't think that's out of the question for Derrick Henry. And then lastly, Devon Achane. This is the guy I want to dig a little bit deeper in this tier. This Dolphins offense, for a lot of people, it gives them pause. There's a lot of concerns about the health with Tua and just the bad vibes around the offense in general with the whole Tyreek Hill and Tua situation. Mike McDaniels appears like he might be on the hot seat. Well, he probably is on the hot seat if this is a disastrous season for the Dolphins. But Devon Achane, I am not concerned at all for him. When we dig into his numbers last season, 85 targets in 2024, he fits that mold of, elite production at the running back position with that volume in the pass game alone. And I think the team is going to get creative on how they deploy him based on camp reports. He's kind of lining up in the slot. He's lining up out wide a ton. And I expect that kind of usage to continue this year. And I'm excited to see what happens with Achane in this offense. When you look at the running back 2 position, they expect it to be Jalen Wright. Is it going to be Alexander Madison? Alexander Madison's now out for the year. They just worked out a couple of veteran running backs. And, Jalen Wright has looked okay. I haven't heard glowing reports from him in camp. I don't expect him to be, pushing and have a stranglehold and making this as 50-50 split, not even close. And then you have Ollie Gordon, who I think could maybe emerge as more of a goal line back in this offense. He looked pretty good in his preseason debut, but really just no established RB2 behind him. So I don't expect his volume to be siphoned in any way. And let's also look a little bit deeper into his stats from last year. 18.8% red zone target share was good enough for 6th in the NFL for running backs with a minimum of 50% red zone snaps for their team. And we also look at him, and he led all running backs with 27 slot targets. As I said before, this team is looking at different ways to deploy him, and I think he's going to be in the slot, and they're going to find creative ways to get him the football this year and more manufactured touches. And this is a guy who doesn't really need a ton of volume to be extremely effective. 4.5 yards per carry behind the 31st ranked run blocking offensive line is super encouraging. It just really goes to show that even with not a ton of space, Achane can make players miss and make things happen when the ball is in his hands. And again, that's an encouraging sign, especially given the fact that that offensive line was not very good last year. And the last thing on Achane, and we'll move on, is, he had 5 top 3 fantasy finishes last season, which is extremely, extremely encouraging, and played all 18 games. I think all of these running backs, as I noted initially, I think they all have RB1, like the RB1 upside. I think that is very much in the cards, if things go well, if they have a healthy season, if their offenses don't become a disaster. And the biggest one to have concern over being a disaster is the Dolphins. But the good news is they did bring in some backups in Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers, who I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're the best backup quarterbacks in the world, but it's certainly better than what they had last year over there in Miami. But let's move on to tier 3, a little bit of a smaller tier here, just 3 players in tier 3. And I call this the promising with top 5 upside tier. I don't think these running backs, have the RB1 upside for this season, but it's certainly possible in their future. I'm just not banking on it for this year. When I look at the running backs in this tier, I think Bucky Irving and Chase Brown are very affordable for their upside. Chase Brown is a guy that consistently goes at the 2-3 turn, sometimes even middle of the third round. And that's a really, really awesome value. We talked about it. I have Ashton Genty here at 7. I have Chase Brown at number 8. I have Bucky Irving at number 9. And let's dig into Chase Brown a little bit here. Chase Brown, explosive traits, right? I mean, this is a guy who ran a 4.43 40-yard dash. From weeks 9 to 17, he averaged 23.7 touches, 116 yards, and an 86.2% snap share. I don't expect him to get that kind of elite workload, like where the snap share is pretty much just him on the field. Did they bring in Taj Brooks? They brought in Samaje Perine. Zach Moss is no longer there. But even if that workload goes down a little bit, I'm not concerned for Chase Brown. I think he's still going to pay off for fantasy. Bengals defense could also be worse this year, guys. I think that's very much in the cards for them. This defense looked awful against the Eagles, second team in the first preseason game. And with a bad defense is going to probably put them in shootouts and in passing game situations. We saw how they used Chase Brown, in those passing game situations. I expect him to get the ball in space, swing routes in the backfield, some screens, maybe some, higher depth of targets as well. Would not surprise me this season for Chase Brown. In the first preseason game for Chase Brown, and I don't like to make too much about preseason, but the Bengals offense was out there a decent amount in that first preseason game. Chase Brown, 75% of the snaps, 100% of the carries, 30% of the targets, and 60% of the routes. He had 8 total touches, 3 receptions on those drives that the Bengals' first offense was out there. And I think that's super, super bullish, super, super encouraging. It's really Chase Brown's, it's really his backfield. That's what this coaching staff has told us this offseason, and I don't expect it to change. I was a little bit concerned about Taj Brooks. I thought maybe they would also bring in a higher profile back in this backfield, but I've came around on Chase Brown, and honestly, that value in his cost is just super, super hard to ignore. I don't really know why he's going as cheap as he does, but he's absolutely a smash play this year for me, and I'm going to try to get as many shares at his cost this season. Now let's move on to tier 4 here. This is a lot to unpack. This is a very, very large tier. I look at this as stable running backs here with workhorse upside. I think all these guys have a chance to be the workhorse or already are going to be the workhorse in their room. But let's walk through it. We have Josh Jacobs here at number 10, Kyron Williams at 11, Omarion Hampton at number 12. Jonathan Taylor, 13, Breece Hall, 14, Alvin Kamara at 15, Kenneth Walker, 16, James Cook, 17, and Treveyon Henderson at number 18. Now, let's start off with the top here. Josh Jacobs and this Packers offense, they don't have an established number 2 behind him, right? You had Marshawn Lloyd drafted there last year. He's dealt with some injuries and some current concerns there. Maybe Emmanuel Wilson's really more of that third down back kind of in the pass catching role. We'll see. But Josh Jacobs is stepping into another workhorse workload. And when we look at the next guy, we have Kyron Williams here. A little bit concerned about Kyron with the touchdown upside. Devontae Adams coming in. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to catch passes in the end zone, in the red zone. And Kyron Williams might see a little bit of regression there from a touchdown standpoint. Omarion Hampton is a good one to talk about. With Najee Harris, the injuries, that it just doesn't pass the smell test there with his eye injury right now. It seems like, he would be out there by now if this wasn't a concern or an issue. And if you're not familiar, Najee Harris hasn't practiced all offseason, at least in training camp, due to a firework accident on the 4th of July. If Najee Harris was healthy and that never happened, I might not have Hampton as high here, maybe a couple ticks down. But Hampton's getting all the burn with the ones. This is a new system for Najee and Hampton's getting all that time. He was a first round pick. First round picks at the running back position typically have I mean, a very, very high floor and don't have a high bust rate, at least for fantasy in year one. I expect usage to be really elite there. My concern with him is the Rashawn Slater injury. They just paid their all pro left tackle, and now he's done for the year. Extremely, extremely disappointing. So I'm curious and want to monitor who they bring in, if they bring anybody into there. If they don't bring anybody in at the left tackle position, any type of veteran, it might be cause for concern a little bit more, where I might tick him down a couple spots, but no overreactions here at the moment, but something to monitor. Then we go back to Jonathan Taylor here at 13. I've talked about Jonathan Taylor, not a strong season last year outside the fantasy playoffs. He was not a top 15 back the entire way until, you add those explosive games he had in the playoffs. I don't want to take that away from him, but I just don't have him, inside that top 12. Brees Hall, they had the Braylon Edwards, in the mix there, but I think it's important that this Jets team, I think their identity is running the football, and playing through the running back position is going to be huge for them. That offensive line should be very much improved. And I think Brees Hall is going to have an elite role in the pass game. I think they're going to be very creative with him. Do I think Braylon Allen's going to get some touches? Yes, I absolutely do. But Brees Hall, where he's going, his cost, I'm comfortable with it. He's about a mid to late third round pick. And I like where he's going, and I like the upside. His pass catching ability is hard to ignore. And we know Justin Fields likes to check the ball down a ton. And so I'm expecting, Brees Hall to have a really, really high floor. People will say, well, you have Braylon Allen, you have Justin Fields, those goal line touches might not, Brees Hall might not get those. And while that very much may be true, I don't expect this team to be on the goal line a ton, and even in the red zone, I could easily see Brees catching a couple passes, near the goal line, and that's probably where he's going to score most of his touchdowns, in my opinion. In that red zone, it's probably not going to be on the ground as much as it will be in the pass. But then you have Alvin Kamara, and this is the guy that I want to dig deep into the most here. Alvin Kamara is a guy I've been on extremely bullish this offseason. 2024, he had 1,493 all-purpose yards, 8 total touchdowns, 68 receptions. He's got a career average. He's got 71 on average receptions over the last 2 seasons. It's a really, really high floor for him, and role in production for him. He was number 1 in target share among all running backs in 2024. We love running backs that can catch the football. And I think that team's going to be playing from behind a decent amount. I don't expect the defense to be very, very good. 4.2 yards per carry was actually a career high in some bad years with quarterbacks. He faced the 8th most stacked boxes too, and he was still able to be very, very efficient with his touches on the ground. There's also a player who had back-to-back top 5 finishes on a points per game basis. I think people are fading him because of the age and, the offense maybe not being super, super good, but I think his cost is extremely, extremely affordable. You're talking about a guy that goes in the 4th round, sometimes late in the 4th round, maybe even slips to the 5th, is very, very possible for him. Contract and competition wise, not a ton of competition here. Saints they brought in Cam Akers. Kendra Miller looks like he's the solidified number 2. And you have Devin Neal there as well, the rookie draft pick. But they did re-sign Kamara to a 2-year, $20 million extension last year. I don't think they did that for no reason. I think Kellen Moore is going to make this offense much better. And I expect big things for Alvin Kamara again. And when you look at him, 8th in explosive rating per player profiler, 15th in breakaway run rate, and only 1 season under 57 catches in his entire career, which is a very, very high floor for Alvin Kamara. And we know the ceiling is very high for him as well. Let's finish out this tier and then get to the last tier and get you guys out of here. Kenneth Walker. I have concerns with Kenneth Walker, right? Just because of the injuries. I have no doubt in my mind if Kenneth Walker is healthy, he's a top 12 play almost every single week. But he's missed a lot of practice already this offseason with this foot injury. It's not a new injury either. That has me a little bit concerned, but the scheme and the system is so, so good for Kenneth Walker. He's one of the better outside runners, that I can remember coming out of college. And, if Kenneth Walker can stay healthy, this could be a very, very good value for people for where he's currently going. I might click on him a few times depending on how far he slips, but the injury concerns, are a real thing. And I will be taking Zach Charbonnet in some drafts just because of that injury concern. I expect Sharps to be involved as well. Finishing out here, we have James Cook. I'm expecting touchdown regression for Cook. RB17 is probably pretty low compared to consensus, but I'm just not super bullish on him this year. I think he'll be, a mid to high end RB2 is pretty much where I expect him. He maybe has RB1 upside, but not high end. But and then you have Treveyon Henderson, who I've been extremely high on this offseason, the rookie at 18 here for the Patriots. We all saw what he did in the first preseason game. I didn't really need to see that for Henderson to be like, okay, I'm bumping him up my rankings. Josh McDaniels, pass catching back. We've seen James White. We've seen Shane Vereen. We've seen Danny Woodhead. These guys get elite usage out of the backfield as a running back in the pass game. I expect that to be there for Treveyon Henderson, and he's behind a veteran running back in Ramondre Stevenson, who has a fumbling issue and quite honestly just doesn't have the juice that Henderson has. And this offense is going to need some pop because that's something that they lacked significantly last season. I think Josh McDaniels is going to absolutely love Treveyon Henderson. Let's move on to the final tier. It's tier number 5. I have James Conner here at number 19. I have RJ Harvey at 20, David Montgomery at 21, Chuba Hubbard at 22, Tony Pollard at 23, and Aaron Jones at 24. This is tier 5 high end RB2 upside, right? That's where I have these guys. I think all these guys have the ability to finish as a high end RB2. I don't think RB1 is in the cards for them, but I think high end RB2 is certainly in the cards this season. Let's start off with James Conner, right? Trey Benson behind him. We've heard a lot of talk this offseason that Trey Benson will be involved in that offense. And I think it's very much possible. The preseason usage was pretty bullish for him with the first team offense. I expect Benson to be in there, but keep in mind, James Conner's dealt with injuries. He was out there for preseason, but they don't need to have him out there a ton. He knows the system very well. He knows the offense, and he's a veteran that's dealt with injuries. And I think that they wanted to get him out there early and then get him out there get him out of there pretty quick. Let's go to RJ Harvey, who I've been extremely bullish on, of course. I love RJ Harvey. I loved him coming out of college. I think he truly can be a top 15 back in the second half of the year. He's got J.K. Dobbins behind him right now, or at least not behind him, but he has J.K. Dobbins in a split workload with him. But Dobbins is known. He's injury prone, right? Last year was like the most games he played in his entire career, and I think it was somewhere around 10. I'm not extremely solid on that number, but I think it's about 10. And overall, we saw him lose steam as the season progressed last year for J.K. Dobbins. I think he's going to be a guy that's used in Sean Payton's offense. Sean Payton never uses just one running back, but that doesn't mean you should be scared to own, the more expensive guy and the just overall the better guy in this backfield at his cost right now. I mean, he's going as the RB 25 right now, RJ Harvey, and I think that's pretty low. I'm higher than consensus. And when you look at the preseason usage, I think it was extremely bullish, right? Harvey played 12 of the 13 snaps on first and second downs, while Dobbins took all 5 snaps on third downs. And people might sit there and say, oh, well, that's concerning for the pass catching work for Harvey. That third down role is a premium for the pass catching. But when you look at the numbers a little bit deeper here, and thank you to Nathan Jank from Pro Football Focus, it was actually pretty bullish considering that the Denver Broncos had 63 receptions on first and second downs to the running back position compared to 22 receptions on third downs last season. We know this is a running back system that's going to feature running backs in the pass game a ton. I think RJ Harvey has extremely high upside, and I'm excited to see what he does this year. Then you have David Montgomery. Look, Mr. Consistent, had some injuries last year, but when he's healthy, this is the rock solid heartbeat of this offense, in my opinion. They love David Montgomery, and I don't expect them to, just stop using him, even if Jahmyr Gibbs maybe gets a slight uptick in usage. I think David Montgomery is going to be a high, just be a high end player at the goal line. Just overall a good player for them that they're going to get the ball to. He doesn't have high RB1 upside, but he's going to be a stable piece for your running back room. And you could pretty much plug him in your lineup and feel pretty happy that, hey, he's probably going to score a touchdown every single week, or has that ability for sure. Chuba Hubbard, I have him here at 22. I did drop Chuba Hubbard down a little bit in my rankings. I think the usage with Rico Dowdle on third downs is something to note. I think Chuba Hubbard had elite usage last year with nobody else in the backfield. I think Rico Dowdle is going to be effective there. I think he's going to be used. I think Chuba Hubbard is still a fine play. I think it's going to be it's an ascending offense. I expect them to use Hubbard in the pass game still, but I think Rico is going to siphon some of that volume. So I dropped him down a little bit in my rankings. Tony Pollard here at 23. Tajay Spears with the high ankle sprain, it ended up being better than we expected. It looked like it could have been, an Achilles or an ACL. It ends up being a high ankle sprain, but those things are not easy to come back for, especially the running back position. They don't, you don't come back quickly with those. And sometimes it's a nagging thing that, you never quite get right. And that could be something that affects him all season. And Tony Pollard is a guy that can be a workhorse. We've seen that. And I think he's going to get workhorse volume, a steady veteran who has been rather healthy outside of that one injury that he suffered in Dallas, but he's been rather healthy his career. To shape things or round things out, we have Aaron Jones here at number 24. Aaron Jones is a guy that could absolutely finishes like RB15. He's got a really, really awesome offensive line. I do think it's worth noting Jordan Mason is somebody that I think this team believes in. I think Jordan Mason's going to be a threat to siphon carries at the goal line. He could be the goal line back. It's very much possible. I don't expect Jordan Mason to be a big player in the receiving game. I expect that to pretty much exclusively go to Aaron Jones, which raises his floor and a really good system overall for the running back position. I expect Aaron Jones to be an RB2 this year. Might be a little bit lower than consensus on him, but I really, really like Aaron Jones in this offense. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I appreciate you all watching. We have tons more content coming out. I'll probably drop one more of these videos right before the season starts, just in case there's any updates or changes. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we appreciate you guys watching.